All right. So, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Education Summit Edu-Chat series. Happy to be back again. So, we have go on hiatus last week. So, Edu-Chat series, we have come to Edu-Chat series number 6, where we chat with experienced educators across Malaysia as well as across internationally, where we talk all about education with experienced educators from various different backgrounds on education ideas, solutions, and strategies, right? So for today, joining us with the EduChat series will be someone that you're quite familiar with, right? So for those of you who have joined in the Education Summit 2020 during June, right? So you're probably quite familiar with this next speaker that will be joining us right now. So a little bit introduction about this speaker before we invite him up here. So he's currently serving as a lecturer, I believe, from here. And he's actually quite interesting. Initially, when I was chatting with him, we were talking all about education strategies. So I could call him sort of like a magician of education strategy approach, where he have various different kind of education programs, activities, techniques, and that you could actually utilize firmly to enhance the learning experience in your classroom, as well as to better engage with your students, right? So with that case, a little bit introductory about the speaker over here. So he is, I wouldn't reveal his name yet. So he basically, okay, let me see over here. He's basically an associate professor in University Teknologi PETRONAS, and he's actually graduated in his PhD in chemical engineering from Imperial College, funded by Commonwealth scholarships, and he was actually appointed as the director for Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning as well in UTP. So he championed something called the Student-Centered Learning Pedagogy Initiative in the institution, and he was appointed, surprisingly, as one of the National Education Policy Reform Task Force member from October till April of 2019, and serving for the former education minister. And as well, currently right now, he's an associate professor, and he's very passionate in doing research with relating to nurturing values, deep learning in engineering via different SEL approaches. So he has also very deep interest in doing research on catalytic reaction engineering, biomass development and production of biofuel chemicals. So it's all about engineering. So for those of you who are teaching any form of STEM education, there's something very interesting that we will be discussing with him shortly. All right, so without further ado, I would like to invite our guest speaker for today, Dr. Muhammad Tazli Azizan. Right, good morning, doctor.
Good morning, Jay. How are you?
All right, good here. It's nice to see you again.
Nice to meet you.
All right. So currently right now, so doctor, so just running through with you. So currently MCO is they just lifted the overall learning. So students are back to school. So currently right now, how's the situation over at your university right now?
Okay. At the university, we only have a lot. We are allowed actually to fulfill 30% of the capacity of the students. So not all students are allowed to be back yet. I was told that it's going to be in October, but I would say that at the moment, the students who are allowed to come back is the final year students. Those who have to do experimental work or studio work, something like that, they are allowed to come back. And then we have also the students who actually have difficulty in internet connection. So, for example, like those who living in remote area, they can apply to come back to the university so that they can have a better online learning experience. And also we have first year students who just registered in May, so they can come to the university so that they can experience at least being at the university.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
So as of now, it's still currently online learning. So not back to face classroom yet. Okay.
Yes,
So
yes,
learning
yeah.
is still continuing. Everything is basically coming on online for the moment.
Exactly, exactly.
So I guess today we'll be talking all about creating learning experiences, meaningful learning experiences. So yeah, I guess let's start it off with a couple of things over here that you have been sharing over during education summit, right? So
Right.
we're talking all about the background on how educators should actually learn to become a better educator with various different approaches, right? So
Right.
maybe we start with you yourself. How did you actually get into the education line as a lecturer and
Okay.
starting to be passionate about education approaches by
All right. Okay. I started actually my passion to become an educator started when I was in University of Sheffield. That during that time I did my first degree in chemical engineering, and I think because of my surrounding, because I mingle a lot with the postgraduate during that time. I mean the PhD students who have families. So when I actually mingle with them, and then you know they told me about the work as an academia, what does it take to become an academic staff and so on. So after that, when I reached my final year, then I have this put a, I mean, kind of decided that okay, I think I want to become a lecturer someday. But I was thinking during that time maybe I should try to work first as an engineer. But it only lasts only for 2 months as an engineer, because I'm more passionate with people, not so much with things, but more with people. So I think that by joining to become like a tutor or training lecturers, that's the best option for me. So that's why I applied several universities. I got many offers, but I chose UTP during that time, University Teknologi Petronas. And I went there. They sent me to my master studies, and then I came back and served as a lecturer until 2009. And then I got these scholarships to further my PhD studies. So along the way, I mean, even during the teaching period from 2005 until 2009, it's actually even though I do not know much, I didn't know much about the pedagogy, but I always try to challenge myself to be better. I remember during that time, I was actually challenged to teach one of this subject, HSE, Health, Safety and Environment. Every semester, we have to teach about 600 to 800 students. I mean, like a massive, sometimes in a massive lecture, we break it down into three cohort, like three classes, 200 students each. And I actually being tasked to take one large number of students, 200 students. And most of the time, the problem before this, most of the time, those who teach these students, this batch of students, will end up get low teaching evaluation marks. Because the students keep rating them low because the subject is a bit dry. The subject is a bit dry. So I challenged myself. Okay, I'm going to make sure that I got above the line. Just to make sure that I got a good score from that. So that is the time that when I started to look into creating some kind of project competition, do some kind of talk show, involving students more, even though it's just a lecture style of class. So I did those kind of things, and alhamdulillah, I mean, it was good rating actually. I finally managed to get a good one, and then I went to further my PhD studies, and then I came back. So when I came back, I was actually even though my PhD was not doesn't got anything to do with education per se, it's just chemical engineering, a pure chemical engineering. So I actually went to I was called for the interview for this post of for the post of the director for the center of for excellent teaching and learning, because that center was established in 2014, and I was appointed as the first director for that particular center. So I really, when I started on that, I really know nothing actually. I know nothing much, and then fortunately I managed to get some network. For example, the first one that you interviewed last time, Prof Karim.
right?
Yes, he is one of my mentor until now actually.
Okay.
So I always communicate with Prof Karim. That is one, and then I have another one, Prof Kairia. She's from UTM. She's also the expert on the pedagogy side. and Prof Karim is on the technology side. So these are two people that I learned a lot, and then there are several others where I actually went for workshops, training, and so on. Like I think the workshops that was organized by Prof Karia on active learning, I went there 3 times. I organized 3 times that particular workshop, and every time that workshop being organized, I make sure that I attended, because sometimes when in teaching and learning, whenever that you start to do something, I mean, there are certain things that you think that it is small, but it's actually making a big impact.
Right.
Let me share with you just one simple technique that I always use in my class. Have you heard about like the technique called think, pair, and share?
Think, pair, and share.
Uh-uh.
Maybe you could elaborate more on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
The think, pair, and share. I mean, for example, like if you want to ignite the critical thinking of the students, you cannot just simply, for example, you teach in the class and then you ask student, okay, I mean, in the past, lecturers or teachers sometimes will say like this: do you understand this? And the answer will be yes or no, right?
Right.
Yes, no. Which part you don't understand? Everything. So
Right.
the lecturer like repeat again and again. So that's not a really good way in order for us to engage with the students.
Right.
And then if let's say you have a question that you want to ask the students, for example, like please tell me why do you get blah 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 blah, something like that. All right, and then you ask the students. You cannot simply ask the student, okay, you answer this. Students are not ready for that. If let's say we as the if you are in a meeting, right, as well, and then you being asked bombard the question, okay, what's the answer? Of course you're gonna get froze, kan? You're gonna get froze, and then you'll be able to answer well. And then what happened to the students when you ask them, okay, what's the answer? I don't know. Just
Right.
shook their head, and then we started to find others, and then nobody want to answer that because they're afraid that they're gonna make mistake.
Right.
So that's the problem with our students, right? Because they have been all this while never been trained on asking question, or being asked like that. So the concept of think, pair, share is easy. All right, we have this question. Can you please tell about blah blah blah, something like this, or what happened if let's say you change this and this, for example, and then you say to the student, okay, I'm going to give you 30 seconds. Please think about the answer. Okay, so you allow for about 30 seconds roughly, and then before you ask for the answer, you ask the students, okay, now I would like you to talk to your peers beside you. So what's the answer? So everybody exchange the conversation. Why do you do that? Because that is actually the purpose of scaffolding them, so that, okay, my answer is the same like you, or maybe we can brainstorm more, we can get a better answer when we discuss together. And only after that, then you start to ask, okay, you at the back there, so what's the answer? Okay, you wearing the pink tudung there, what's your name? And what's your answer? So that is the time where actually we start to we get the answer, and then we give feedback to the students. So that session would not take much more than 5 minutes, actually, overall session. But it is very impactful because it was studied by more than, I think there are a lot of papers discussing about the impact of active learning. That is considered active learning, actually, because you are doing some kind of activities in between the lectures. Sometimes what happen is that the teachers need to always like, okay, I want to focus these 30 minutes doing lectures, and the remaining minutes I will do some activities. By the time towards the end, the students already lost their focus. So in using active learning, usually there will be like what we call as advanced organizing activities, and then there is a closure, and in between that there is some intermittent activities. So your lecture, if let's say 1 hour session, your lecture could be like 3 times, 10 minutes to 12 minutes, another 10 minutes, and in between that we will have some kind of activities. So during this online learning, I also practice similarly, and then when I practice in a way that whenever that I give lecture during the live session, I make sure that I use some engagement tool in between that. So for example, like you can use like macam Mentimeter, you can use other tools. I think as for now, I love Mentimeter. So Mentimeter is really engaging because you can create quiz, you can create ask question and answer. The students can ask you something. you can make a quiz, you can make polls, all those kind of things. So that is somehow very things that I learned not only from one sources, but whenever that I learn from many sources, I try to combine that as one of considerably a good approach. And most of the time, whenever that I wanted to do something new, I always refer to the articles or journal papers what has been reported. Okay, and then I try to look into that and try to think, okay, if I adopt this, what kind of modification that I should make into my class. And most of the time I collect the data. So I always ask for the students to respond back. So for example, like when I did certain kind of innovation in the class, I always ask the student, what do you think about this? Can you please put your reflection on what I have done? You know, so that's somehow the practice that I usually did throughout my teaching and learning.
Okay. So, in a way, like what you just described just now, the think, what's that term again? The
Think, pair, share.
think, pair, and share. So
Yeah.
it's almost like providing them an opportunity for their brain to synthesize out some form of information in the brain
Yep.
before really questioning them, and to also
Exactly.
them to work with other brains as well to come in from
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
That is something interesting. It's something that I myself I actually utilize in schools as well when we are training
Yeah.
students. So, like what you say, when we're asking a question, the brain is not prepared yet for those type of questions, right? And as you ask them to discuss, they may have a different meaning that is created among them
Yeah.
before providing us the answer,
Yeah.
right?
And then
So,
actually it's actually trying to balance different style of learners, that method. Because for example, like when you don't ask them to discuss straight away, you ask them to think first. Think what will be the answer for the next 30 seconds. That is suitable for the reflective learner. So that the reflective learner, they need sometimes for them to really think about that. And then when you ask for the discussion, that will benefit the active learners. So you are trying to balance different learning styles for these particular students.
okay. So, all right. So, speaking about active learning, right? So, during the education summit, for those of you watching right now, if you have any questions for Dr. Tazli, right, you can just click on the link over here where you can directly just join us in this chat and have a direct question for Dr. Tazli himself over here as well. So, I can see Wendy is inside here. Wendy, could you turn on your mic and also your video? Then I can bring you up onto the stage right over here. Okay, so I guess Dr. Tazli as well, right? I guess you're currently teaching chemical engineering in your
Yes.
current lecturing profession. So
Yes.
how me myself, I'm coming from an engineering background. I see that there's a lot of complication when we actually go into engineering. It's all dealing about formulas, a lot of background ideas that you have to master. There's like a certain foundational level that you would have to have in mind before being able to move on to the next level, right? So,
Yeah.
in order to ensure that, let's say, for example, a student, if they have not, for example, mastered a previous chapter, and we're proceeding on to the next chapter on
Yeah.
towards, right? How do you deal with those type of students that may not have a, a in tandem progress with what you are currently teaching right now?
Okay. We're talking about online right now, or we're talking about the face-to-face
Yeah,
things that happened in the
both
past.
could be both as well. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So in the face-to-face, this is where actually I discovered that if let's say we are making the students dependent on the teachers, it will stop our progress. Because most of the time the students, if let's say the students that don't understand anything, they come back to the teacher. So what I tried to do is actually I tried to stimulate the peer learning environment, in a way that the students feel that they're not supposed to be dependent only to the lecturers, but they can also be dependent on their friends, or the team. So what I did initially, at the start of the semester, I started with what we call as cooperative learning. Okay, cooperative learning means that these particular students are clustered into a dedicated team already, at the start of the semester. So these students, I arrange them. I don't ask them say, okay, you can form your own group. I don't do that. I assign groups for them, and then I try to mix up with student with certain ability and certain personality. For example, like I also ask them to do some kind of personality test, so I can see whether, if let's say you put too many dominant people in a group, then they're gonna fight with each other. Or if let's say you put too many introverts in the group, they will just want to keep carrying each other, and there will be no decision being made. So those are the things I considered as well. And when I create this kind of a team-based learning, so most of the activities in the class are actually team-based activities. So for example, I have 2 hours of lecture. So maybe the first 1 hour I can actually just give a lecture. In between that, I have some intermittent activities. And the last 1 hour, I said, okay, this is going to be team-based activities. So team-based activities is when actually I give them some kind of problems, and then they need to try to solve that, and then try to discuss and do some kind of sharing. Sharing maybe not necessarily maybe during that time, maybe it will take the other class, or maybe they just share whatever it is through by uploading through our Facebook group or platform, e-learning platform, and then I give feedback after that. And these students, those who actually feel that they are lagging at the back, they are somehow being forced to make sure they are prepared. Because learning engineering, again, I agree with you. Like if let's say you don't prepare yourself, then you're gonna be a bit behind. But at the same time, when you give that kind of team activities, it will reinforce the understanding. That's the first thing. The second one, it will allow them to be dependent on their peers to actually teach them how to solve this particular problem. So in that sense, I'm not worried much about moving to the next chapter and the next chapter, as long as I know based on their feedback, then I know that they are learning something. There are certain keywords that they have already discussed and come out from the discussion. That means that the students already grab certain concept very well. What I did as well when we did this team-based activity is always some kind of hands-on. So the problem with engineering is that it's very conceptual, it's very theoretical, but it is quite difficult difficult for the students who are actually sensing. They call it sensing learner. So the sensors, they cannot imagine those theories or concept. They need to see it visually. They need to see the data. They need to see by doing experimentation. Only then they'll be able to learn. So this is what we found, the mismatch between the traits of the learning style of the lecturer, of a professors, as well as the learning style of a student. Because the professors tend to be more intuitive, tend to be more challenged, like more theories, but the students otherwise they like more experimental work. So somehow there are certain things that I conducted simple experiment with the students. Like I asked them, I used to teach them reaction engineering, okay, about reactor system. And of course reactor system is in a chemical plant and they cannot see it. They cannot imagine how does the reactor look like. Even they cannot see what is inside the reactor. So I said, okay, next week please bring plastic bottles, okay, plastic bottles. And then I also purchased some kind of like tubing, piping, all those kind of thing. And and then we divided them into the team. They follow their own team, and then I give instruction that, okay, you are going to create your own mini reactor design. So, and then they use a reaction between Coke and Mentos, something like that. And yeah, and so, I mean, we're doing outside, not inside the class. We're doing outside at the outdoor activities. And then the students, when they construct things, they start to see that, okay, for example, like if let's say they're using certain type of reactor, the concentration change along the line. If they're using different type of reactor, then they start to see that, okay, the mixture happen a bit later after certain times. So only then the students can visualize things, and only then it makes sense to the concept. So those are also the things that what I did online right now. Because when I teach online, I cannot teach them about, for example, okay, imagine a heat exchanger. Of course, they cannot imagine that. They do not know what is heat exchanger, right? So whenever that I taught them certain new concept, I always associate with something that is familiar with them. For example, I teach them about continuous process. Okay, whatever that goes in is supposed to come out. I relate to the garden hose. You open the tap, water flowing. So if say you cut across that hose, you will see that the flow rate is the same throughout, from inlet until the outlet. So that is what we call as continuous punya process.
I see.
And then I teach them about they call the concept of energy balance. So I associate with like, okay, let's say it's about using hair dryer, using cooking rice. So those are the analogy that make sense to them, and the students responded very well to it. They said they understand the concept and fundamental very well because it is associated with what they know,
Right.
instead of something that they do not know. So this makes these students become a better, they have a better understanding to make sure that they grab the concept very well. Only after that, then I introduce the equations or the formula or calculation whatsoever. And if they are still stuck with it, I always take back the analogy or the example related to whatever they are familiar with that particular equations.
Okay. So speaking of which, that you were mentioning, when there's a classroom of 600 to 800 students from there, right?
Yeah.
In which way would you engage with them differently in a way? Because 600 to 800, then you
Okay.
have like a huge crowd whereby there's a lot of energy, then there's a lot of ways that you need to engage them. Otherwise, the
Yeah.
behind
Yeah.
will usually be disengaged at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, during that time, we may have this mass lecture, but no longer now because because the university is moving towards student-centered learning. So then we realize that the number of students per class shouldn't be more than 100. Even 100 is big. 100 is already big. But then you still can do like something like active learning inside the class for 100 or 200 students, which means that you still can conduct the lecture, but in between the lecture, there will be some short activities. And then this is where actually the tools and the technologies come in. For example, that you can use clickers, you can use polls, so that the student will be able to respond to you. Um, but I know that there are lots of studies as well showing that having large class size may not be effective for learning. So that's why now, if let's say even we have 100 students, we further divided into two sessions. Like we're gonna have like 50 per class. So 50 per class, it makes more sense to conduct all these team-based activities. Otherwise, it cannot be done.
Oh, I
Yeah.
see.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's say if we talk about the principles on how you approach a class running, right? What would be the main top three criteria that you would usually definitely include in when conducting or preparing for a class lesson plan?
Okay. Um, I mean, the I think preparing for the lecture always take more time than actually the lecture itself.
Yes.
So the first thing that I considered, of course, in terms of the content, what are the things, what the outcomes that I want to uncover during that particular time during the lecture? What are the things that I wanted the students to learn during that time? The second one is actually I always focus on, okay, now I have the content. The second one is, let's have a look at how do I make this content is learn to be able to learn by the students. So one of it is in terms of the design of the slide, for example. Not only that, it's about the activities that I wanted to do. So I started to scan through into my slides, for example, which particular parts here that is difficult, which part here that is going to be difficult for the students to digest. So this is where actually the examples come in and the questions come in. So, as I mentioned the question just now for think, pair, share. So that is where actually I decided, okay, this is the time that I'm going to put some question here so that the students can remember better about what I'm going to teach them. Okay. And then the third one, if I feel that, okay, this is extremely much more difficult for the students to digest, I started to make a video lecture, and I use the concept of flipped classroom. Flipped classroom is where actually I give the video lecture before the class, and I ask the students, okay, you need to watch this particular video. There are quizzes that you need to answer prior to the entering the class. Okay, which means that after you watch the video, you need to answer the quiz, and then when they come into the class, I hand in to them problems. So problems in which they need to solve as a team. And of course, along the, let's say, 2 hours class, then I'll be there to facilitate how the discussion, trigger them more, because in UTP itself, we have started to use all these, what we call that, what we call it a smart classroom. So smart classroom is where actually we have all these clustered table. So the students, instead of facing to the lecturer, we have many LCD TV surrounding them. So, and they can also bring their own device and talk together and discuss the problem, and they can project their work to the nearby LCD TVs. So whenever that they discuss, I move around and I check in terms of what they have discussed. Sometimes I just ask them, so tell me what actually your progress right now, what have you discussed? Okay. And then sometimes they ask me questions. I always ask them back questions. It's not me giving the answer. So as a facilitator, it's always like pushing them to think furthermore, and after that try to solve the problems given. The students wouldn't like it, and wouldn't like it in the first place, because they were actually forced to do more, to think more actually. So but then because, and then in the education system, when they have been exposed to this for quite some times, the way how they were being taught, like being spoon fed. So that's a challenge when we brought that kind of culture to them. It's a challenge for them to really digest it in the first place. But after a while, they come back to you and they thank you for that. So it's okay. It's okay for them. I would say that it's a tough love actually.
Right. I was speaking to a lecturer yesterday in terms of the feedback, right? So the lecturer was telling me in classroom learning, he tried to incorporate a lot of creative and fun learning methods to the student, but not necessarily that they would feel the same way by the students themselves. So based on his survey, right, how students will perceive if the classroom learning is fun or more desirable for them. It's more on number one criteria. If I select this lecturer, will this lecturer give me A in my exam? That's number one criteria. So whether if you make it fun or whatsoever, right, it's secondary from there. So how would you comment in terms of this, in balancing between allowing them to score better grades and going through the learning experiences that is more conducive?
I also have a lot of pep talk with them. Like sometimes I share some kind of motivation. The problem with the student is that because they cannot relate to the future. For example, like what they're gonna be in the future. So I always say that whenever that you are doing this is something that similarly you're gonna face in the future. And this is where actually sometimes I said that you may got straight A, for example. May got like you may have your CGPA as 4.0, but if let's say you don't nurture your skills, such as your communication skills, such as your persuasive skill, negotiating skills, all those kind of things, you're not able to get good job in the future, or you may not be able to have a better future in better future. So that's why I always say that okay, whenever that I design this, it's not meant to be fun for me. It's a learning process, and learning process, of course, it's hard. If you don't feel that it is hard, then actually you're not learning. So this is something that a constant motivation need to be given to the students. So most of the time, so that they realize on the importance of this, and they will start to see it, maybe not during that particular semester, but maybe they can start to see by the end of the semester whether there is an improvement in terms of their grade. So but because all this while I know that some of the students, they are becoming a strategic learner. Strategic learner is like macam, okay, the lecturer is using the same questions lah. I'm going to spot this gonna come up, and this gonna come up. I'm gonna focus my learning only on this, and then they will be able, and then only then he will score an A. So we need to actually somehow fix that culture lah, because they have been, doing that for too long actually. Starting from UPSR, PT3, SPM, is all about spotting what will be the questions that's going to come out, kan?
Yeah. best is that if you can give me all of the questions and all of the answers for the examination, that would be number
Yeah,
one, right?
I will study and I will memorize. That's a problem. But then, as we said, I mean, if let's say they just memorize, it's just they are achieving a very low order thinking skills. They're not moving towards high order thinking skills. Um, and that's a challenge for the lecturers to fix that. Sometimes it is becoming too late, because they have entered. I mean, they are already like 20 years old when they actually enter the university. So that's why I believe that the role of the educators starting from the primary school and secondary school is very important to nurture this kind of culture.
Right. Okay. Like say a typical classroom in your lecture hall, right, or in your classroom, right? How would you really dissect it in a way in terms of the process of how you deliver your classroom learning? A typical classroom, would you be able to describe to us how does it work in a typical classroom
A
that you?
typical classroom. Okay. So when I enter the class, usually I will actually recap first whatever that they have learned. I think this is something that the students like as well. About recapping is like, it's not recap like what I say. It is not like recapping. The way how I recap. It's not like okay, last week or last lecture we have learned about this and this and this and that. I don't do that. So I will always ask them, okay, can you please take your mobile? All right, please key in this code. Can you please recap back? Okay, and then enter. What are the things that you have learned in the past? Okay, maybe they have to submit through the Mentimeter, for example. That's one thing. Another one is what I do as well is actually, okay, can you please take your notes that you have done in the past in the last lecture? All right, so now let's have a look at your notes, and I would like you to exchange your notes with your partners beside you. Okay,
Right.
so they swap their notes. When they swap the notes, so try to go through the notes and try to think about what are the information is missing. Okay, so they actually try to compare themselves about what are the things that they have missed. Or I could also ask them, okay, you have actually done, you have gone through the lecture last week, right? Okay, so from the last lecture, before we start, I'm going to give you the next 10 minutes. Try to do the mind map of what you have read, of what you have gone through. So it's more towards like asking the students to do instead of we explain, you know and with that way, it reinforce more on about understanding things in the past, and after that, only then I started to connect. Okay, so this is what you have learned in the past, and then you have produced this output. Okay, so we're going to continue into something this week with, and then perhaps I give another lecture about 10 to 15 minutes, and then after that I stop in, and then I say, okay, there is another activity that I would like you to do. Okay, so this is a question I would like you to discuss. And then they give answer, I give feedback to them, and then we move to the next section. So that is a normal way of conducting active learning class. But as I mentioned earlier, if let's say I'm doing a team-based activities, so after 1 hour or 30 minutes lecture, I say, okay, let's move to your team. So move around to your team, go back to your team, and then within that team, okay, I handed them some kind of problems, and I asked them to discuss. One of the things that I remember for my class reaction engineering, I said to them, all right, this is things that I would like you to do. Try to associate different type of reactor with what are the real application out there, or things that it can be man-made, or it can be a God creation. So that's why they learn, okay, different type of reactors. For example, like I give example. Okay, for example, like I would like you to associate a plug flow reactor with the stomach, contoh, for example. Okay, with the stomach, which is something not within the syllabus, but that is actually they can start to relate. Oh, actually plug flow reactor is also our stomach, for example. So now they started to wonder, oh, maybe photosynthesis activities can be associated with this type of reactor. So, and then they make some kind of presentation. So it allows them to connect whatever that they have learned in the class with what they know in the past. That is always I think most of the time my lecture I don't miss out on giving analogy towards what they know earlier. So I always make sure that there's something that I could give example to, or maybe some task for them to think about what kind of example could be related to that. Um, and then finally, towards the end of the class, I will ask them to do some kind of like closing. Or for example, like, okay, give me one question, everybody. Okay, maybe, okay. So based on the lectures today, I would like you to think about, I would like you to list down 3 questions that you like to ask me. So they can list down the questions. And then after that, I said, okay, now discuss with your partners. So what compare your questions. Is it similar questions, or is it you have a different question? Or maybe some of your partners can answer your questions. And then after that, only pick one question and give it to me. So they give it to me lah. They maybe they put through the Mentimeter, they upload one question, and I go through all that question, I address the answer. So it somehow give them satisfaction that, okay, I have this query, and then I now know about what is actually I confused about. There are also times that I ask in between of the lecture, so have a look at this particular slides, can you please share me what is your confusion to these slides? So they need to share. So it gives them more thinking activities inside the class, more critical thinking. I think that's what I usually do inside my class. So those who come into my class, I think after they come out from my class, they always feel tired.
A lot of brain power being
Yeah,
used.
a lot of thinking activities being done.
Right. What about in terms of like engineering? Right, I was recalling during my days studying as an engineer student. Right, so there are a lot
What
of
you study there?
sorry,
What kind of engineering that you study?
mechanical engineering.
Oh,
So
okay.
okay, so let's talk about calculus or let's say physics in that way, right? Then
Yeah,
you have a lot of questions in the workbook or on in the main textbook or in past year questions. So there could be like 50, 60, 70 different kind of questions, right? That they
yeah,
have to go through in order for them to grasp the basics of understanding the concept.
yeah.
So how would you address all of these questions? Do you get them to work together? Do you create videos in explaining all of these methods of solving the questions? How do you tackle the details of answering questions like this?
Okay, I did some actually. I did some examples on like videos, or I have a tutorial session with them. But I don't really fancy of making them answering all the questions whatsoever, because that is I consider as drilling activities. You know, once you know some things and then you plug into equation, you be only be able to achieve the apply level 3 Bloom taxonomy. But in the end, you want to make sure that the students achieve like all those high order thinking skills taxonomy. So it's not simply by just giving, okay, let's open, I want you to do this exercise from number 1 until number 10, and then do the calculation. I mean, the students can do on their own just to reinforce their understanding. That's fine. But on my side, usually I will give them more open-ended activities or more open-ended questions, so that they can start to relate about what they have learned with a new thing that they are going to solve. For example, recently I gave them a team quiz, formative. It's kind of formative assessment for them. A team quiz. I asked them to be in the team and try to solve the problem about werewolf. I mean, I want to teach them about material balance. Okay, material balance is one of the subject in chemical engineering. But I give a problem associated to werewolf. For example, like there is a couple being bitten by the werewolf, and then what would be the independent equation material balance that you could develop if, let's say, one of them died, one of them alive, one of them become werewolf, one of them become, so there is no kind of that question in the textbook, but they have to think on their own, try to relate what they have learned in the past to make sure that they could sensibly solve the problem. So those are always the thing that I always give to my students, so that they can think further. Because I know that once I give this kind of style, if you remember as well, one of the things that I give them is what I call as flip assessment.
Right, right.
The
Yeah.
one that they create their own questions and complete solution. So these are the things that make them become mastery. You know, because the process of creating that questions, they need to do some kind of exercise first, right? Try to go through maybe 5 to 10 questions, try to solve on their own. Only then they get some taste of, okay, this is gonna be my questions look like. So instead of we are focusing on making them doing the drilling activities, we give them a bigger task so that the process of achieving that bigger task is going through all these activities by themselves. So I think, yeah, so that's what is my focus about when I give them certain kind of assessment. So I don't waste the coursework mark just for the sake of asking them do the textbook
Right, right.
calculation, you know.
Yeah. Okay, so in by itself, you're really looking on beyond the classroom, whereby how they can really apply the learning into real world application in that sense.
Yes, yes,
Okay,
yes. Yeah.
right. Okay. Some questions from the audiences over here. So from Nazira Ahmad, when you ask students to exchange notes, right, how to make sure that everything in their notes is the right knowledge, they understand the true concept as well. Wow. Okay. So there's a question by a lot of teachers as well that okay, when you ask them to share among themselves, they might be disseminating a wrong information amongst
Yeah,
themselves,
yeah,
and
yeah,
there's a risk of doing that. So how do you ensure that all of
yeah.
them are receiving the correct knowledge?
Okay. So what I always do whenever that the concept of active learning, there are actually three things. One is individual construction. The second one is about exchanging or pairing. The third one is about sharing in the class or feedback. So here, if let's say we want to acknowledge whether okay, this is an actual, whether we want to check the understanding whether it's correct or not, there always be someone who need to share what they have gone through. So for example, like here, this is about exchanging notes, right? Exchanging notes. So maybe I after they have exchanged the notes, I may call someone. Can you please share what are the notes that what are the notes all about? What are the things that you notice something as that is missing? What are the things that you feel that this is maybe wrong and it's not me? I mean, those instruction I give, of course, I give in advance before they start to exchange the notes. So whenever that they start to exchange the note, they will dissect it properly. You know, it's not just simply just okay, I have this and you don't have this. But of course, it's like whether is this correct, or maybe there are certain things they are not sure of. Okay, when you read the notes, please write down one question that you are not sure of. So those are also the things that you can discuss in the class. Yeah.
Okay. So Nazira, thank you so much for the question. So for those watching right now, if there's any question for Dr. Tazli, please do comment down below or click on the link that you can join us on this chat directly over here, right? Okay. So I guess in a way, let's say when we were to be going through the overall concept of education in bringing them to attach the knowledge of what they are currently learning right now
Hmm.
together with what they will be utilizing in the future, right? Putting
Yeah.
on the engineering sense, right?
Yeah.
Uh, how would you really bring the industrial application knowledge, right, into the classroom by itself? So we talk about heat exchange and things like that. A lot things that might not be able to grasp by students
Yeah.
in depth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. um I mean, other than, I mean, if, when we talk about the chemical plant, for example, like, of course, I understand that some of the students, they have not even seen the chemical plant. Sometimes YouTube or all those kind of thing, it could be helpful just to give some kind of awareness level, because I used to also do the virtual tour, do my online class. So they are actually, VR kind of develop YouTube, so I just project it to my students. I bring them to the tour and I tell them, okay, this is this distillation column, this is that, so they'll be able at least to see it. But the most important part is about designing it, because they have to design those kind of things. So whenever that I wanted to relate about something new that they want to learn, for example, we talk about heat exchange. So I started to give example. Okay, maybe I talk about the adsorption process. Adsorption process is where actually you have the minerals. I mean the absorbent is actually absorb some impurities So I relate them with like, okay, water filter. Water filter is something that they could understand. So I would say that the concept is actually the same. The concept is actually the same when you have the absorbent, except that the absorbent is much taller, it's much bigger, and then you have several packings inside there. So the concept is almost the same. So that is where actually something that is relatable to them. Another thing that when I do the
So
pardon?
you do like virtual tours, so in a way that you take the camera or 360 camera and you virtually bring them into the chemical plant. Is that right?
I can't do that at the moment because I did that during the MCO. So what happened is I found that several good YouTube videos from I think from US, a petrochemical plant in US. So they have this virtual tour. So I say, okay, I highlighted, okay, we move. Sometimes I pause for a while. Okay, this is what is it actually, So they be able to see that. The secondly is that I always bear in mind that not all of my students here were gonna end up becoming an engineer, right?
Right. Mm.
Like you, Jay, you're not become. But the most important part is the engineering thinking behind that. I think that is very important. So for me, is instead of like totally just teaching them about the engineering calculations, making them master about that, my aim is actually to make them mastering the engineering thinking behind that, because you know that once you have this engineering thinking, it will be useful for you at whatever place that you're going to work, because you may not end up working at the chemical plant, you may not end up as an engineer, you may actually end up doing something else which is totally in non-engineering field, because that is what is happening right now. But I always see that those who are actually coming from the engineering background, we have this kind of systematic thinking, you know, the way how we think, structured way, all those kind of things. So those are the things that we need to really make sure that our students have that particular capability. So
Right.
I always reinforce on that particular things. And when you mention about how do I bring that kind of experience of getting to know about something which is not within their field, this is where actually I brought, like, for example, problem-based learning. They call it problem-based learning, PBL. So PBL is when the students are given certain kind of problems for them to fix. I used to have students, for example, I asked them to design, I have this kind of problem and ask them to design. So they need somehow to see how does it look like, and they need to go through several activities, several readings or whatsoever. We also have like our planned visit, but again, as I mentioned, I think even if you ask some of the engineers, they are working, they may not know, they may not be able to tell the flow inside there, how does it look like, because
Right.
it's very it's
Yeah.
inside there, it's inside there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, Dr. Tazli, just to share one story, when I was in engineering school, right? So there was this one of my friend which is sitting beside me. So
Mm.
on that day, the classroom was teaching about the mechanics of a car's the inner parts of how the car works, right? So we talk
Okay.
about
Okay.
internal combustion chamber, then we talk about how the pistons works and things like that. And I
Right.
was really fascinated that during the first class, right, my friend is able to pick up all of this concept, right, instantly. He's able to answer all the questions and he's able
Uh-huh.
to relate it very well. Then I was very curious, how come this guy can know all about this during the
Uh-huh.
first class itself? So until I guess the next week, when we were going out for makan or something like that, right? So he brought his car together with me and we drove together. And when I saw his car, I immediately understand why. And you know what's the reason? The
He's the
guy is
mechanic.
like, yeah, he's like an enthusiast in modifying his cars. So he always brings his cars to the workshop. So that's why all of the internal parts of the car, right, it's in his mind already. So to
Yeah.
him, it's so relatable in a way that it doesn't really require any form of explanation for him to make sense of the
True.
entire thing.
Yeah, that's true. I think that's a challenge for some of us, like teaching. Even I think chemical engineering is difficult because you cannot see what sits inside, and then trying to tell them about things, to try asking, making them to imagine is quite challenging. That's why I always believe that at least one thing that could scaffold them for this is development of virtual reality, VR. If let's say they are using VR for this, I think that could help. By the moment we still lacking in terms of the content developers for this. and it's still expensive. So yeah, but if we have that, I think that could support the students to understand better.
Okay, so one question over here from the audience from Aziz Rajab, right? So nice to see you again, Aziz. So his question is that have you come across solutions given by your students that are really astonishing because it's totally new solution that may be different from your solution? So typical movie, right? That the lecturer suddenly discovers this genius student that may have a solution that is way more easy and simplified and way more astonishing in a way. So have you come across some students that are managed to display these kind of qualities?
Actually, I have I still can remember him. He graduated, I think, 2 years ago. 2 years ago. This guy he looks simple. I mean, before this is what happened. I mean, I taught these 160 students. Okay. But we split into two. So mainly I taught 80 students, and my teaching partner taught another 80 students. And before this, we were actually told that this batch have really problem. I mean, they have problems in what do you call that, in their exams whatsoever. I mean, when we do the examination vettings, we always see that this group, like the numbers of students who got A is like less than 5, even though you got 160, and there are lots of failures. So, for example, like thermodynamics fail, subject like what I teach is they fail as well. So I told my partners, and then we work as well with another two more lecturers who are teaching other subject, but still within chemical engineering subject. So let's say let's think about something that we could devise for these students. So this is where actually my class started to do flip. We call it flip classroom, flip cooperative learning. For me and my teaching partner, we do the same. We discuss the same activities that we're going to do, and then another class, another subject, they just conduct active learning. Throughout the way until I think week 6 or week 7, we conducted what we call as integrated problem-based learning, which means that instead of that one course give different problems, and my course giving different problem. Okay, so what we did is actually um, try to try to combine the problems together. So we come up with only one project to the students. So the students are going to be assessed by different lecturers on different components, right? So what we did is actually we asked them to design a membrane reactor design for steam reform, for gas reforming, something like that, for steam reforming. So when the students, I found that this one student, he was actually a very deep learner. He is actually a deep learner, and he was not given chance to do so when he went through several courses before. But when he was in the class, he explained things much easier than what I explained, how I explained,
Right.
and the students can grab it. Like what? Okay. So sometimes I call him, okay, Zohar, come and then just present to the whole class. What do you think about it? And other students also. We want Zohar. Can Zohar can please share his thoughts about this? Um, and surprisingly, yes, towards the end of the problem-based learning design, he came out with a design which I have not expected them to do. You know, um, and I asked them how actually that you come across this kind of design, and then he said that we went through like more than 20 journal paper, which I didn't expect them to do, but because the desire to really solve that particular problems, so they went through a lot of journal papers and tried to find the best solution that they could fit in.
Right.
And that's I would say a surprising outcome from me. So this batch of students, once they finish their semester, very intensive semester, they make a very significant leap of their performance. 96% of them improve in terms of their GPA. There are also students who jump very high in terms of their GPA. For example, I have this one girl. She got 1.8 in her previous semester, in semester 3. Can you guess what she got in semester 4?
Uh, semester 4, 4.0, 3,
Uh,
3.5 and above. Yeah.
From 1.8, she got 3.6.
Wow. Okay.
It means that it's not only improving in my course. It doesn't mean that she only got a good grade in my course, but it's also other courses that she enrolled within that semester. I have also this one boy who got 2.4 in the previous semester. He got 3.4 for that semester. And
Wow.
then I have this one boy again. He got he always got like 3.3, 3.4 for the previous semesters. That semesters he got 3.96.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what changes? What is the approach? What's the thing that really triggers them to really make the leap from what they were
When I ask
previously
them
doing?
actually, when I ask them what actually that you feel the difference between what you have underwent through in the previous semesters and this semesters. So um, they said that the one thing that they really learn is actually how to learn. The skill of how to learn. So before this, they just learn as how they're learning through how they're going to be assessed. It's like the way how they're being assessed is like
Right.
just
Memorizing.
strategize something, memorize something, spot exams, and then they'll be able to get it right. But when I change the way how I assess them, as I mentioned earlier, assessment drives learning. So when different kind of assessment being done, they started to look into different way of how to really learn to make sure that they improve. So I think that makes a significant impact to them. And we as a team, four lecturers here, we feel that we were quite nervous as well when they started to enter semester 5 because they were in semester 4. Because semester 5, we feel that maybe, and the courses over there are much tougher, and would they go back to their initial way of learning, or would they actually sustain with the way how they learn right now? So fortunately, starting from that point, they keep improving until I think they become a very competitive batch with other batches that we have. So it's a good outcome. It's a good outcome.
Okay. Right. I guess from the assessment point of view, right? Could you run us through on the methods that is being utilized in doing assessment? So, for example, like engineering, there's a lot of calculation, and there's like very specific methods that are already being set, right? If you want to get 10 marks for this question, then you
Mhm.
need to go through part one, part two, and part three, and eventually the answer has to be at a certain level in order for them to score the full 10 marks, right? Are assessments like this still being utilized in your
I
school
was
as well?
I was against that, and I'm very thankful for the COVID for this, because when COVID comes in and this kind of MCOs, we are forced actually to teach online, and that close-ended exam is no longer relevant to the students. So the lecturer have to think about what kind of open-ended way that we could actually test the students instead of like, because it's very close-ended. You give this equation, you plug in numbers, and then after that you justify where you got this number. That's all. But that was a close-ended format. In the open-ended format, I mean, we have to give some kind of scenario. It's a problem based. It's a problem solving where actually the problem is ill defined. It's supposed to be ill defined. There are things that the students need to make their own assumptions, and with different assumption, it leads them to using different way of assessment. Because you know that as an engineer itself, one thing that I always say that to my students, I said, even as an engineer, whenever that you have a problem, you have to open the book, you have to read through things, you have to find information. you know that's funny when actually you were asked to assess by closed book exams, because takkan when you have problem you not close the book
Yeah.
to solve it, right? You need to go and find information. And these are the scenario that when we do this open-ended, that is where actually we try to create this kind of scenario for the students. So that's why I'm very thankful. Somehow I think the lecturers are a bit uh, they are nervous. I think lecturers are, they're not ready somehow when they have to do this thing. But it has to be done. It has to be done. It has to be more open ended. The calculation can go into a various way of doing it. You may not get the similar answer like your friends, what your friends are doing, because it is based on your assumption, based on your understanding in solving this problem. So yes, I think that it's no longer relevant, that particular calculation. That you can do that as part of, example in class, that is fine. But to test students whether they can include the number in the equation, um, it's not that easy. It's no longer valid actually.
Right. Okay. I guess I'll drill in more on that based on the assessment part, right?
Yeah.
So we're talking about assessment. So question from Wendy Tan over here. So talk about measurement. Is marking rubric sufficient? So
Sufficient.
adding in on for active learning. So
Yeah.
yeah, any ideas with regards to rubric marking of rubric?
One thing I think, when you start to do this open-ended assessment, there's no other way to mark other than actually producing a good rubric for that. So my rubric is always, whenever that I develop my rubric.
Sorry to stop over there. So maybe if you can give a very brief example on what a marking rubric is about for those who are not
Oh, okay.
familiar
So
with it.
the rubric itself is actually the way how we assess the students. Because, for example, rubric is always made for open-ended kind of activities. For example, like a closed-ended, there are specific answer to that. For example, like you are doing mathematics, 2 plus 2 is 4. There's no need for you to develop rubric for the answer is 4, right? But if, let's say, we are doing something which is much more open-ended, you cannot just simply prepare an answer scheme for that. It has to become with the what do you call that, rubric based. Are you there, Jay? Okay. I think Jay is not. Okay, Jay. Sorry, I thought I lost you just now.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. The last part that I hear is about marking rubric. You were giving an example of 2 plus 2 equals 4.
Yeah, 2 plus equals to 4. Then that's a very specific answer. Then there is no need for a rubric for that. Okay. But when you want to actually develop a rubric, okay, what I always do is actually I want to make a distinct difference between the ability of the students to do something. For example, like, let me share with you. I think it's easier for me to put a sharing of the slide, which I actually conduct a webinar yesterday.
Okay.
Okay,
Right.
so it's much more clearer
Yeah.
in
I'll
a
put.
way. Yeah, so I can
Yeah.
share the screen later.
Thank you, Wendy, Tan, for that question. Yeah. Let's
I
have
can
a.
I can share the questions, and then after that I'll do the. Okay. So can you see this question?
Okay.
Okay. So
So
this
yeah.
is a questions that I developed, that I give a team quiz last Thursday to my students. So this is a problem related to werewolf, where I mentioned to you just now, right?
Okay.
Okay, and then I said that from this particular question, I have an expectation for my student, which means that they need to do some analysis, okay, where they need to come up with, they need to identify what information is missing, and provide some values for it, provide some assumption. So this is where the process of analysis happen. This is level 4 in Bloom taxonomy. And then after that, students need to relate to the context how to solve this problem. So this is about number 2. Even though the word used is describe, but it's actually applying whatever that they have known before to a new context. So this is apply. This is level 3 Bloom taxonomy. And then the next one is actually student derive new equation from the context, which is create. So this is where actually they create some kind of equations here. So I'm actually assessing whether they should be able to analyze, they should be able to apply, and they should be able to create. So when I create the rubric, okay, so the rubric itself, I just have specified 3 criteria. First is about ability to analyze something. Second one is about apply. and finally about create. So what distinguish between a good student and not so good student is how deep they could go in order for them to, for example, like how deep they analyze it compared to the students who just give assumption without any justification. For example, like apply. So it's about how they be able to relate the old knowledge that they have with the new information. So they will deserve higher marks. And compared to those students who just copy paste from the textbook, you know. And then about derive, whether they be able to derive all the equations needed sensibly, then they will have a higher marks from that compared to those students who just derive equation but out of context or wrong. So this is where actually I derive the rubric. I create the rubric because it actually differentiate between a surface learner as well as a deep learner.
Okay.
Okay, Jim?
Well,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So I guess like what I see from there, right, is that you have different criteria. One is a simple criteria whereby they can give the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Second criteria is whereby they have to put in their old knowledge and use it in a creative way to fuse it together with the current knowledge that they have.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you sort of like reward them for that even more because they are actually applying it in a way that makes much more sense in that perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So that the students, because I believe that those who are deep, more deeper, like your friends who are actually very much into the car, you know, they know everything. He should deserve a better mark compared to those who didn't know, right? So this is a similar thing about that.
Right, right. In a
Yeah.
way, it's sort of like unfair because haven't those who have never serviced a car before, they might never get the
Yeah,
free
but
yeah.
uh, what I'm trying to mean is that of course I treat these students. Everybody didn't have any prior knowledge to this topic, so it's that who put more effort and who understand deeper. That is where actually the students will get a better marks.
I guess using the car analogy, right? A mechanic that is servicing your car, they might not be able to understand the equation and things like that, but
Mm-hmm.
they surely know about the cause and effect of a problem, right? So if you
Yeah.
have a engine breakdown, they might be able to trace it back to down to the source of the main
Yes.
thing that has the
Yes.
problem, and they're able to relate systemically on the entire big picture of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's the technician kind of job, right? If let's say you are engineers, you need to know that what's the theories and fundamentals underpinning those kind of things. So those are the thinking part that engineers need to know.
Mm, okay.
Yeah.
So I guess another question also from Aziz Rajab. Questioning is the heart of teaching and learning. Do you agree? Questioning is the heart of teaching and learning. So
Yeah, I do agree with this. I mean, for example, like our students, what we miss from our students right now is the ability to questions, ability to ask questions, because they have been forced. I mean, they have been taught in the past, like, okay, the teacher said no, don't ask question, jangan ask. You know, for those who ask question, it's like rebellious in the class, for example. And some of the teachers do not like that, but we should actually encourage questioning, you know, because when people question because they are trying to fulfill their curiosity. So we are when the teaching and learning activities happen is actually to fuel the curiosity itself. So if we stop questioning, if we stop asking question, and we stop student from questioning us, then actually the teaching and learning does not happen very well. I mean, it won't take very well. So that's why I think doing the questioning is a technique that we need to teach the students. And a very powerful way of asking question is using all this 4W and 1H, you know, why, what, and all those kind of thing. And we need to really, because once they start to give this question, even when we start to give this question to our students, this is where actually we tested their higher order thinking skills.
yeah, I was an example I would like to bring up is that, for example, like chemical engineering, right? So, questions also they have different levels that might excite interest from students. For example, okay, why does this chemical reaction happen? So that
Yeah.
might not create much more of an excitement for students. What I saw
Yeah.
is that there are certain lectures that they will put in. Okay, there was this incident during 1995 where the entire laboratory exploded, because
Yeah.
they mix a certain kind of
Yeah.
concoction of chemical products together. Let's find out why the entire thing explode, and he go through the entire process on how the entire explosion happens, and through that the students get so engrossed. Wow, something
Yeah.
exploded. So
Yeah.
I might really need to find out from there
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
happened from there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
Okay. Right. So, yeah, questions are coming in right now. So, again, from Wendy Tan over here, in your opinion, what is the optimum ratio for written assessment versus practical assessment? Hmm.
I couldn't answer that, because for me, I always believe in what will be the learning outcomes that we want to attain. That's very important. For example, here when mentioned about written assessment versus practical assessment, it depends on what kind of outcome that we want. For example, that if let's say our outcome require more on the practical things, hands-on things, then we need to put emphasis on that. What happened in the past, I think even until now, is actually even though that you have spelled out a higher taxonomy outcomes, but sometimes they are still being done in a written assessment. For example, like if we want the students to be able, if let's say the learning outcomes if let's say the learning outcome is students to be able to create some kind of prototype by the end of the semester, you cannot assess that in the written examination, right? You have The only way you have to do that is by asking the students really developing that prototype, and towards the end present it to you, and say their opinion. Okay, why does he created this particular prototype, and so on. Only then it meets the outcome that we spell out. For example, the ability to evaluate on something, that could be possibly asked in the written examination. But there are things that we can only assess through our own observation, not by through marking the exam papers. So again, it brings back to our intended outcomes. What actually that we want to have for that particular course? What kind of skills that we want the students to have? So only then it brings us to deciding what kind of assessment that we want to do to the students.
Okay. So in terms of practical assessment, right? Like doctor, in your own classroom, what kind of practical assessment do you do? Prototype, as in they have to create like a 3D model,
Oh,
or
something like that. I mean, it doesn't have to be 3D model. Sometimes it's just a design, like a 2D design using certain kind of software, or they can also, a lot of the things when you involve chemical engineering design is actually the calculation. For example, like you were given specific problem about, okay, you want to have, for example, like my final year students right now, they're supposed to develop the biogas plant from pig manure, because there are plenty of pig plant, and then they want to convert the manure of pigs itself into biogas.
right?
So it's a new problem. Nobody have done that before, so they need to do the calculation starting from it gives them 2 semester in order for them to solve the problem. So that is actually the design itself. So this particular student, of course, they wouldn't have any final exam for that. The last thing that we wanted to see is their reports, how they do the calculations, as well as their final presentation. Yeah.
Okay. So, Wendy, thank you for that question over there. So, Dr. Tazli, so in a way, I would like to skew the conversation into a different direction for a bit. I guess you work together with Prof Karim, right?
Yeah.
In the academic of how's that word again? Academic of excellent learning.
Yes, I think he is center in academic development excellence, something like that.
Okay, right.
Okay.
So I guess could you tell us more about that? I guess he was mentioning all about how to train a group of lecturers to increase their ability to have a better and effective learning ability and teaching abilities. Are you actively involved in that as well?
No, I mean, as what Prof. Karim has been doing at his university, I've never involved in that particular series, but I think it is quite similar with what we are doing back at UTP, University Teknologi Petronas. For example, like these lecturers kind of being forced to go back to to teaching and learning workshop and training. But I think the most important part, what we realize is actually we need first to change the philosophy of teaching among the lecturers. If let's say you just if let's say the lecturers are not still stick to the old teaching philosophy, give whatever tools that we supposed to give whatever pedagogy that they are just using it as mechanistic, from as a just for mechanical. They not really believe in that. When they do not believe in that, then the learning would not happen effectively well. So of course we have some students who complain about some lecturers are not be able to deliver active learning very well because the lecturer themselves didn't believe in active learning. So that is our challenge, is actually to convince them that this method actually works. And if let's say you use student-centered learning, it will make your students to become a better learners. But because in the first place that we didn't believe in that, of course you're not going to do it wholeheartedly, right? On the things that you do not believe. So that's why it doesn't work. It won't work. Um, so yes,
And I see that,
training
Dr.
them.
Tazli, that you train a lot of teachers and lecturers also on
Yeah,
ways to effectively improve their classroom teaching and such, right? Would you be
yeah.
able to share on some of the main criteria, right, that you always encounter when dealing with a lecturer that really tries to enhance their classroom learning? What are some of the key things that they really have to pay attention to in order for them to be successful in this?
um I think when they started to do this particular teaching and learning, I think one of the key things is about improving self. For example, like you cannot satisfy yourself by just attending one kind of training and you say that I'm master in this particular pedagogy, I'm master in using this kind of tool anymore. So it doesn't it won't work that way. I think, as I mentioned earlier, that I've been to a lot of workshops, a lot of training. I still consider myself as I'm not really expert in certain things as well. So it's about the desire to learn and improve self. I think that is very important for us to become a better teacher. And I found that some of the lecturers or teachers, they decided not to go to any kind of training. They just said, okay, I'm just going to Google and find the information, and then find the techniques or whatever, and I'm going to try in my class. I think that is a bit tough because you would not understand the philosophy behind that. So that's why a very systematic, in order for us to become a better teacher, a better educator, you need to undergo to a systematic training. Only then you'll be able to really grasp all these important tools and techniques. Because again, as I mentioned earlier, even the small techniques, if you're missing, it will make an impact to the class. If let's say you didn't do some things, then it will make an impact to the class. It won't work that very well. um, so again, I think the most important part is for us to consistently improve ourselves, going for training. I mean, spend time for training is very, very important actually to become a better educator. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess I think going on towards this, right? I guess Doctor, you are sort of like a father yourself as well. You have children at
Yes.
home. Uh, they're currently in primary school, right? Am I correct?
One in secondary school, form 2, the
Okay.
eldest one, and then I have another 3 more in primary school.
Okay. So as a lecturer yourself, and then you're so passionate in identifying effective teaching method, right? So
Yeah.
tell us about in your home, right? How
Uh-huh.
do you actively take a part as an educator towards your children as well?
Not for the academics punya subject, not really.
Right.
For example, like whatever that they are learning at schools, I don't really, I just add on some flavor to that. Not really as if like I have to check their homework. I don't do that. I don't believe in checking their homework. um, Going to school, I think as for now, school is stressful enough for them, so I don't make them extra stress. But actually, I teach them certain things that they are learning at school in different way. For example, like I remember there's one time my daughter, she wanted to take UPSR during that time, and she was asking me these questions about science, subject science, and then she said that how actually to identify which one is which. So I said, okay, it's about, I think it's about heat, Hubble, conductor Hubble, identifying which one is the conductor Hubble. So I said, okay, now you go and take two glass, two mug, fill up with the water, hot water, and one of it I want you to put plastic spoon. Another one I want you to put the metal spoon inside there. So bring it to me. Okay, let's do some timing. 3 minutes from now, which one will get colder? Which mark will get colder? So they is actually, and then they started to realize that, oh, if let's say I put the metal spoon, I'm gonna get a colder water compared to those with the plastic spoon, because the metal spoon is a good conductor. So it's about seeing and believing in it. So those are the things that I always experimented at home. And then I teach them to do house chores, for example, like folding blankets. I remember this when I taught my, I think 7-year-old, now he's 12. I taught him how to fold the blanket. So, okay, now I would like you to see me how I fold this blanket. Okay, let's do like this. All right, because I also asked him to help me. Okay, let's fold the blanket. Okay, now I take another blanket. Now you show me how you fold the blanket. Ask them to show me back. And then after that, he remember until now. Similarly, like making cucuk kodok at home, cooking at home. So it's like, okay, come and help me, and then you see what I'm doing. Okay, now I want you to do yourself. You tell me by saying it. Okay, what's next? What's next? What's next? Then until then, I think he remember, and he be able to cook similarly as what I did. So those are the things that I always emphasize at home. Not really on the academic side, but it's always about doing things, and then answering on, and then along the way sometimes I travel with them. I remember when they were young, and then I asked some kind of science concept to them about puddle, and then okay, and then we drive through a puddle in a big rain, and then there's a big splash. So I asked them, how do we make a big splash and small splash? So, and then okay, if let's say you have a small puddle, and then you drive it slowly over there, what will happen to the splash? So that is what actually it triggers them to think. And I always love that kind of conversation with them. So it always made them thinking on the go. And I think it becomes a habit for them. They always question me a lot. So I think that and they said that they could not do that at school. They couldn't ask the teachers because the teachers didn't like it that much on asking question.
Right.
But whenever they are at home, they are curious about something, they always ask question. And whenever they ask question, I ask them back question. What do you think about this? Why do you think it's happened that way? So it become a conversation, a table, during the dinner, during the lunchtime. So yeah.
Okay, so there's a very interesting moment where you get another opportunity to bond with them through science or academic.
Exactly, through a lot of questioning, and answering things. Yeah.
Right. So in a way, right, in observing your children's learning in school, right, do you actively sort of like observe on how their school are conducting their classroom learning in their own manner? So do you have any opinions on that? Do you provide them with trainings to enhance their
What I did is actually starting from when we came back from London. I think unfortunately my children, I think two of them, the eldest one, managed to go to the school in London. And then some sort of getting some kind of exposure in terms of their literacy and numeracy, all those kind of thing. And then when we were back here, we know that the education system in Malaysia is not that. It still needs some kind of improvement, lots of improvement per se. And I think that if I want to homeschool my children, it's just that we can do that, but the problem is my students may not, my children may not be able to mingle around with other students, you know, of different social class. For example, I can send my children to international school, for example, but I think I want them to learn more in terms of, you know, understanding different people with different social class, different problem, different issues, and learn more about being empathy, having empathy. So those are the real reason why I send them to sekolah kebangsaan. But of course, sekolah kebangsaan has certain aspect where they are lacking. And what I did is actually I participated in the PIBG, Parent Teacher Association, and I am now I am the YDP of my school, my children's school. Okay, and this is where actually we started to infuse slowly about you know, what are the things that could be done. Even this is my second, I think the second school that my children went to. The first one was in Sri Skandar. I was also the YDP PIBG at that school before. And after that, when we moved to Ipoh, and then my children now is in Ipoh with I've still participated as the YDP PIBG at the school. So in the previous one, I also handled training. I offered I offered to the great to the GB Lusa. I said to him that I can give a training for free for the teachers. So yes, I participated in that. I mean, of course, there will be some kind of politics and bureaucracy over there, but there's some sort of like welcoming. And after that, I can see that there's a change in the way how the parents and teachers collaborating with each other. So that somehow some kind of improvement. I know it's gonna take some times, but it was it was a welcome in a way. For example, like in this school that we're going to plan later is going to have a webinar with some practitioners outside there to the parents. So we're going to offer that kind of session with the school teachers as well as the parents. So it's about actively participating at school and then give suggestion, all those kind of thing. I think that is where actually they will welcome that.
So you do participate as well in enhancing the type of education and the level that the teachers are getting exposed on different technologies as well
Yeah,
in
yeah.
school.
But you have to do it slowly. You cannot do it like, you know, you're going to take over that, but you have to do it slowly and then do it whatever within your own control.
Right. Okay. So
Yeah.
so speaking of public schools, right? You were involved in the National Education Policy Reform Task Force, right? So
Yeah.
could you give us a little bit glimpse on what you were currently doing during that moment of time, getting involved with the task force?
During that time, I was tasked more on the higher education, actually, to look into the policy of higher education, such as looking at how to make sure that the students are more bringing them to become as a job creator instead of job seeker. So we try to define further on that aspect, making sure that what else that we could do in order to enhance that kind of capability, because it was already spelled out in the blueprint education. At the same time, we also look into from kindergarten until schools level. So I also participated in those kind of discussion. One of it is actually to suggest we somehow propose a new education model where we feel that at school, at primary school especially, the students need to teach to teach more on the values and character building. Those are the things that we want to emphasize on, because the academic subjects can come a bit later, you know, learning about academic subjects. But the thing is, what is lacking right now is on the character building, on the 21st century skills itself, like the value of collaborations, critical thinking, be able to think creatively, as well as what do you call that, another one, collaboration, communication, creative thinking, creative and be critical.
And all those type of
Yeah.
humanistic
Yeah.
skills as well.
So what we propose is what we call as phenomenon based learning, something like that. Phenomenon based learning is like, you know, instead of segregating the topics or subjects, we say that why not the students learn based on scenario. For example, like at the canteen, what are the things that students can learn when they having when they go to the canteen? They can learn about mathematics because they are actually doing the transaction, buying things. They can learn about manners because they are sitting at the table. They can learn table manners. They can also learn about language because they are actually communicating, conversing in certain language. So they can learn also about science if let's say the teachers really focus on the certain scientific things happen in the canteen. So that is what we actually do, we propose. So it moved from one scenario to another scenario, so I don't know, I hope that hopefully that it's materialized someday, but we feel that that is actually the way forward so that the students can connect one topics, one subject to another subject instead of like being feel that this is disintegrated.
Right,
And
right.
especially we feel that it's very important to teach to make the students like the subjects such as science and maths, is by actually really showing that how they could apply science and maths in their real life. So
Okay.
that's part and parcel of what we have discussed in that task force.
Right, right. I was chatting with one of the founders of one of the private schools, right, in Malaysia. They had this very interesting concept whereby in their school, right, they do not have any form of structured syllabus. So
Mm-hmm.
they have all of the so-called grammar, mathematics, the fundamental education. They put it on the learning process on Khan Academy, which is open source platform by
Mm-hmm.
itself. But the
Mm-hmm.
main core of their education is really on project basis. So, for
Yeah,
example, for during that semester, right, the students will choose their own project that they want to do. For example,
yeah,
if they want to take on social media, so
yeah,
their main criteria is to really find out ways and to figure out on how to achieve that project,
yeah,
even
yeah,
primary and secondary school aspect as well.
yeah.
So any comments on this form of education, which
I,
sort of like deviates
I,
towards from academic?
that is wonderful actually. That is actually trying to make them because the students need to see the goal in order for them to learn. They wanted to know the goal. I also have difficulty with my son, the second one. He's 12 this year, and he's very extremely happy when UPSR is being cancelled. Because he don't see the purpose of of studying for UPSR. He don't see that. He
Right.
always question me like why I have to to do well in my UPSR. I don't think that I have to do well. I mean there is nothing. I still go to the secondary school, right? He asked me, and then say yes. I mean you are right. You are logically right because he always think on the logical sides, and I always feel that he in that sense he needs a goal in order for him to learn now because he's so much interested in playing the what actually drive people to do something that they are passionate of. For example, like he likes to play PUBG, the games, yeah, mobile game, and then he knows about everything there. Before this, he liked to play Minecraft or something. He knows everything about that, and you know that in Minecraft, he found about chemical about I think gallium.
Right.
So he wanted to know more about gallium, so he went to YouTube to learn about what is gallium is all about.
Right.
So it's actually somehow because he has a certain goal that he wanted to know, then that is what actually the learning will happen. But when the students didn't have any goal, for example, like okay, you just learn like everybody else. This is a subject that you have to know. But for example, like okay, history. What's the purpose for me to learn history? If I don't have any goal, I don't want to learn this. So that's always the issue, right? Because some of the students who got straight A is because that they been purposely said, okay, you have to get straight A. So that is their goal. So no matter what it takes, I just need to get my straight A's. That's all. But some students will question, for example, why I have to learn science, for example. You know, so they need to be shown about their own goal. So, and we learn by solving problem actually. So if let's say they have a problem given to them, this is where it will trigger them to go and enhance further the understanding to solve the problem.
Right.
So I believe, like for example, when you relate the case with the social media itself, maybe because there is a problem related to it that is so much of his interest that will make him and go and learn by himself.
I guess on top of that as well is really an opportunity for the students or the children to experiment on different aspects to really know what they are really interested in. Because during
Exactly.
our time, it's spoon fed to us. There's no discovery process of
Yeah,
identifying, oh, I'm actually good in art or music, or
yeah,
if I'm
yeah,
talented in mathematics in that way,
yeah.
right? So
And
we go to,
we
yeah,
always think like arts and music is second class,
yeah,
you know. So
right,
that's what we felt,
yeah.
which is not right for me. It's not right.
So when we go to secondary school, right? Which aliran do you want to go in? Is it science stream, art stream, and things like that? It's more of like, oh, I, for good student, I have to go to art stream, but they,
Science.
yeah,
Yeah,
but they go on towards that without really identifying or knowing what their current strengths are, what their attributes are, what their interests are, and
yeah,
they lose that journey of self discovery in a way to really
yeah.
identify them to make career choices in future,
That's
on
true.
which really resonates them with their strengths and weaknesses as well. Right.
Uh,
Okay, so a few comments from here. So from Sarmista Ghosh, it's important to change mindset of teachers, stiff resistance from lecturers in transforming their teaching styles. So yeah, echoing on what we just discussed just now, every lecturers and teachers would have their own particular teaching style. Most probably, the teaching style would be transferred from their previous generation, right? If their teachers
exactly,
taught them in
exactly,
that, they would
exactly.
probably use that way as well, right?
Yeah.
So in breaking through the mindset of things, I guess is really more on towards exposing towards new things, new concepts and ideas. Any takes on that, Doctor?
I also actually from if I recall back my previous experience studying in UK during that time, um, I have these traditional teachers who actually traditional lecturer who are just teaching in a massive class and do not bother even to know our names. It's just my task is just teaching. I just come to the blackboard and just write whatever that I want to write, and after the class, then that's it. Um, and I know that that would not be effective for me if I want to become a teacher, because I feel that that particular way, I only understand what is chemical engineering is all about until I reach my final year.
Right.
You know,
Okay.
if, I force myself to just go through my first year and second year just to make sure that I managed to get some good grades so I can sustain it. And only in final year I started to realize, oh, this is the job of a chemical engineer. Why I didn't know this before? Because I was not taught in that way. I mean, there is not enough scaffolding that is being given and so on. So that makes my paradigm shift in a way that if I want to become a lecturer, I really need to make sure that my students really know what they are undergoing through. You know, what they will be after this they finish this particular degree. So that is actually my aim. Even though, for example, like when I teach my students on certain topics, I always make them see the bigger topic first, bigger picture first. Only then I bring them to small topics. So I can sense that some of the lecturers, for example, I mean, some of them even actually having good grade when they were a student before. So they feel that because I got good grade as a student before using this method, surely it's gonna work for my students right now using the same method. So those are the things that we really need to fix and change. And I do agree with you. Like we do not have enough examples for us to see. For me, as long as the lecturers are open enough, the educators are open enough to attend trainings, open up to a new perspective, that will be good enough actually. Whether you want to try or not, that is number two. But the first one is actually you need to open up yourself first and try to see what others have been doing outside there and whether it's going to be effective or not, and then you test in your class.
Okay. So, a story I want to share as well. I was just speaking with another lecturer as well recently, award-winning lecturer. She has a very amazing concept when you were talking about finding out what other people are doing. So there's
Yeah.
a concept whereby, let's say, for example, you're talking about chemical engineering, right? So what they do is that they actually created a platform whereby they work with universities from, let's say, USA, right? Also studying on chemical engineering on the same chapter as well. So what happens is that they put both of this group of students from Malaysia in his class together with the students over in US as well, studying the same course. And what happens is that they would gather them and allow them to make exchanges amongst themselves on the things that they have learned and what are the things that their lecturer has been teaching. And surprisingly enough, they discovered that students, when they are in this platform, in connecting with students from overseas, for example, right, they manage to have sort of like a bonding and understanding between each other, and they
Yeah,
manage to sort of like tutor each other, and they can
yeah,
see the disparity in terms of what they have been learning in US and in Malaysia as well. And it sort of like became a community
yeah,
teaching the same subject, whereby peer peer-to-peer learning, it's very adamant, and they sort of like take on the mentoring of different
yeah.
students together.
Yeah. I think Microsoft is been doing that as well now. They are moving toward Microsoft connecting the class to the world, like so that they have using. They wanted to go through, I think, Skype approach, so that a class will be able to connect to another class at on another part of the world, so that
Right.
they can share ideas and thoughts and all of kind of things. I have been thinking about that. I mean, since for the past few years, I was planning to do that, but unfortunately, I could not do that because of the semesters difference. You
Right.
know, our university is a bit different compared to others, so it's quite difficult to get that timing correct. And I know that there is a lecturer. I think you're talking about the same lecturer as I know.
I see.
I think she's teaching microbiology before, and then she tried to connect from different universities so that the
Right.
students be able to communicate among themselves and solve the problem together. Yeah, I like that approach actually. It's open up them to see how they could be able to collaborate online, you know, because I think when they start to work later on, there's a lot of online collaboration that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I guess let's talk about chemical engineering, right? They may be like 10 universities and colleges offering the same chemical engineering course, right?
yeah,
So in a way, integrating all of this, being able to have students to have a variety of lecturers, even
I
from
like
different
it.
universities, to
Yeah,
learn.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that could be a good concept, very good concept. I mean, it could be done, but again, it's actually about. I don't think that's going to be a big problem for the students, but somehow it's going to be a problem for the lecturers.
Yeah,
Changing their mindset is not easy.
yeah. But in a way, uh, different students relate well with different lecturers and different teachers.
Yeah,
So if they have sort of like the alternative form towards that, or like a rating system, right? Then you would immediately be able to identify, okay, this is the best way to actually teach student on one certain particular subject using
yeah,
feedback from students as well.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think the lecturers are also scared of your feedback.
Yeah. It's like, okay, I might be. Okay, so I guess a statement over here from Aziz, like dental staff, they have
See,
CPD, right? CPD, continuous dental education. So for the service, but as educators, we do have CPD, but it's
CPD.
only professional development, but not professional learning. So educators should have the right habit of mind. Nobody will talk about our professions, but we educators understanding very well what we are doing that will make us professional. Um, so speaking about continuous learning as well, right? So platforms like this, would you be able to iterate more on continuous learning education, especially in towards there's a concept whereby post even though after post college or post university, or after you graduate, how can teachers continue on to support students in a way to continue on their learning process and not just to stop when you get your hands on that certificate as well?
I think this is the role of IPG,
Mm-hmm.
Institute Perguruan. Like they should also offer like in service punya in service training, because the teachers, they cannot just be dependent on the knowledge that they got before they got into the service. There must be a continuous assessment for them. There must be continuous training that they are being exposed to, and this is not. I don't see that much happening in Malaysia. I see that the teachers a bit, they a bit, they just being dependent on themselves, whatever that they want. If let's say they have the motivation to do so, they will just go and find some training. But if they just feel like, okay, I'm just doing the teaching work, every year is the same way I'm gonna do. That's the problem, you know. And then when the instruction comes from the top to ask them to change things here, you know, to make some modification, they kind of become clueless, or they are doing it in the wrong way, you know.
Right.
And I could see that they ended up doing a lot of documentation just to prove that what they're doing is correct,
Right. 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 Mm.
which is not healthy. That's all I can say.
Yeah. I was speaking to one of the international schools, right? They have a very interesting hiring process on their educators. So let's say,
Yeah.
for example, when they're teaching about the subject of chemistry, right? Usually they will not hire a lecturer, but they would actually hire someone that has been in the chemical industry, right? For
Okay.
numerous of years,
Okay.
including like physics, right? They would usually hire actual engineers out there that has been in the industry for 5 years, and then
Okay.
bringing them in and teaching them physics. So to them, they would be able to bring in a much more reality based concept when they are actually teaching the subject of physics as well. So
Okay.
yeah, so the connection between reality and education actually transpire through in the education
Right.
in the classroom. Yeah,
Subject to the experts. I mean the industrial practitioner learn about pedagogy.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Good.
that I think that's one thing. If let's say the industrial practitioners have a strong pedagogical approach, that I think that makes sense. But if let's say just for the sake of bringing, you know, some engineers coming back and teach, I mean, with in that understanding that teaching is just sharing slides and talk about it, that won't that won't
Yeah.
do. Yeah.
Agree with that as well. Yeah. So I guess you are very avid in terms of the pedagogy on how teachers and lecturers approach the classroom learning style. So
Mhm.
in terms of your very own pedagogy, right? What is the current frame of pedagogy that you currently utilize it very well and find most effective in your own classroom?
Um, it depends on the learning outcomes that I want to address.
Right.
Okay, I use somehow a variety of pedagogies, such as as easy, I think, as simple as active learning, towards the end of like using problem-based learning. So there's a whole spectrum in it, because starting from active learning, then we climb into like team-based learning, and then we have a flipped classroom with, you know, cooperative learning comes in, and then we have problem-based learning. And I always select what kind of pedagogy that I want to use based on what are the outcomes that I want to obtain, what are the outcomes I want to achieve. So for example, like there are certain times I use this, most consistently right now I use team-based learning. I always make sure that they are as one team. So even though now when we're doing online, I always make sure that there is some breakout session where they have certain exercise they need to complete, they have certain problem they need to solve. So I think because it's not only about igniting their critical thinking, but it's also improved in terms of how they communicate to each other and how they collaborate with each other. So I think that is somehow ingrained in my teaching philosophy, because my philosophy, I have always looked into three things. One is actually the nurturing the critical thinking. The second one is about effective team working, and the third one is about instilling values.
Right.
So have when I have these three things together, so usually I found that the best pedagogical approach that I could use is either like cooperative learning, team-based learning, or problem-based learning itself.
Okay. So I guess leading on to the last part that we really want to discuss with, I guess Prof. Karim speaks a lot about this in bringing in the value and the to instill humanistic value in the students, right? So
Right.
in which approach, how would you incorporate something like this into a chemical engineering classroom setting?
Yeah. So I think people will say that, oh, this is very technical. How do you actually nurture some kind of values, right? Um, I always think that one of the thing that I like the most to study is actually about teaching about empathy, because I believe that at the moment, empathy somehow is missing in our country. We do not want to be in other people's shoes. I mean, having empathy and having sympathy is two different things. Sympathy is like you're offering condolence to something, but you're not making your decision to act on it. But having an empathy is where actually you start to put yourself in other people's shoes and try to start to think, if I were them, what should I do? So it guides our action, it guides our direction. And having an empathetic leaders is one of the things that we should be, that is also one thing that we are missing right now. That's why we have a lot of problem related to mental health issues, all this kind of thing, because sometimes the people surrounding us do not have that kind of empathy, do not understand each other. So I try to nurture this kind of thoughts in my students. One of the things that really works for how I did is actually, of recently I discovered that I usually ask my students to write reflection by the end of the session. I mean, each class every week, like one reflection. So it's quite a lengthy kind of reflection. Okay, the students write it down. One thing that I realized that in order for me to nurture empathy of the students is also for me to share my own reflection, which I didn't do in the past. So I wrote my reflection first, and to allow the students read what are my thoughts. Only then they'll be able to write their own reflection. First, it taught them how to write a good reflection because I already wrote a lengthy reflection for them to read. And the second one is for them to see, oh, now they start to see it's not only them who are struggling. It's also their lecturers who are also struggling to prepare lessons for them. So they become more kinder in a way. They become more empathetic in a way to their own lecturers, and I believe that is the way forward, a mutual understanding. Even though we are actually just having an online teaching, this is somehow allow us to have a mutual connection. So we understand each other better, even though it's just online. I think I'm going to continue with that kind of strategy. And I think I'm going to preach on that strategy as well, because because I think it works. It works. For example, telling them, for example, it's not easy. What kind of struggle that you're actually facing when you want to prepare material for them. I mean, just be transparent for them. That's how it will work. I have this one thing that of recent, I think a few weeks ago, I think because of the students, they're afraid to tell their lecturers about their story. So what happened is that I have this one girl. She actually she mentioned, she text messaged me. She said that she couldn't take the quiz because she's bringing her mom home from hospital, and then she said that she was already terminally ill. So she brought and then she couldn't take the quiz. So I said, okay, fine, we can take the quiz later. But after that, it was on Tuesday that time. And then the next week, Tuesday, we have a test, actually, class test. And she was there and she did the test online. This is everything online. But then she submitted a bit early. And then I started to see her examples, like her writings. And then, this is bad, I said. This is really bad. I mean, like, I don't think that she have learned into the detail about how to solve this problem, because I don't think and then I simply I sent message to her. I said, how are you? And then I said, I asked her, how's your mom? And then she said that her mom passed away last Thursday. Can you see that a student, her mom passed away last Thursday and she still wanted to come for the test and not telling me that if she could tell me earlier, then she can just postpone the test. I can just retest her some other time. So I told her that I'm going to cancel this test for you. Okay? So after you are ready, then you come back to me and I'll do the test again for you. I don't want to accept this test because it's I don't think it's fair for me to evaluate you during this particular situation. And she was very thankful on that. And I think that creates some kind of bond between me and that particular student. But what I wanted to show is that that's how sometimes we need to ask, because sometimes these students, they have been taught in a way that They're not going to tell the problem to us. So we didn't know about the problem, but sometimes we need to ask, and only then it guide our action. I have a problem. I'm not me having problem. I mean, I saw some students who complain about the lecturers who do not have trust on them. For example, like this particular student said, I have problem in submitting the test because suddenly I have problem with the data, so I have to submit a bit later. Um, but the lecturers simply deduct marks for that. So I don't know. I mean, there are also some lecturers who are being very skeptical. He said, "What if, let's say, the students just want to play, just want to trick us that actually he has some problems?" And then I said, it's better to over communicate. It's better to communicate rather than just assume. It's better to really understand them. I mean, it's no harm doing if, let's say, we want to understand them better instead of we just assume, oh, these students just, he just want to play a trick and because they are going to submit late. I don't think so, especially during this COVID time. We are actually facing the same storm, but we are in a different boat. And we cannot assume other people are within the same boat. So it's a really good time for me, to be honest, that to teach about this kind of values, empathies to the students, and yeah. So don't think about chemical engineering will not be able to think to train those kind of things. We could do that. Being an empathetic engineer is also important. Yeah.
Right. If we look into the fundamental side of education, right? So what is an actual education process, right? Ultimately, it's really between a relationship between teachers and students, right? And if we put it much more humanistically, it's a conversation between two humans, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and a communication and a connection between two humans as well. So
Yeah.
if we were to hold that in account, then all of the so-called all of the theories, questions, examination, it should all stem from here as the
Yeah.
fundamental key of
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Like for example, the uh, assessment or the reflection that you do with your students, right? Do you do it anonymously? Do they share it on a platform, or it's just between two parties, between teachers
Actually,
and
they share it through a platform so that because I always wanted to make sure that everybody understand each other. When they read through other people's reflection, then they started to know that, oh, not all are fortunate like me. I may have a problem in learning, but my friends may have more difficulty than me. So this is where actually I wanted to nurture that kind of, cultivate that kind of values, trying to understand, trying to put yourself in other people's shoes. I have this one student also sharing with me throughout the reflection that he's facing a challenge at the house because his parents do not understand he's having online class. His parents keep calling for him to do house chores, and he cannot concentrate and focus during that. So that is why during that time that drives me, for example, to think, okay, if let's say the students cannot focus during my live class, then what should I do? So I have to put extra effort just to give them some supplementary content. For example, recording video. That's what I did. For example, like, you see the neon board, the light board itself. So I did that because I feel that the students need some kind of extra information, extra knowledge for them to go through. Of course, I cannot conduct the class at 11 p.m. at night, right? But they can have their own time during that time to learn while their siblings already asleep, while their parents are already asleep. I have to think into that direction. So I think, and then when the students being thankful to you, I think that's good enough actually.
right. And I can see that. So for those of you who are not sure what he's talking about on the neon board, right? This is something that Dr. Tazli actually created. Do you actually send this to the students? You created this specifically for your
Yeah,
classroom learning.
this is in YouTube. I put it in my YouTube channel.
Okay, that
Yeah.
you can I can see that, Doctor, you are putting in sort of like more on beyond on what lecturers should actually be doing as a classroom teacher as well, and I can see that you really care about your students' ability to understand and to really understand from their livelihood perspective as well, and it's very not often that we can see something like this. So it's something that I deeply very moved about, and I hope that more lecturers are able to be more empathetic to their students and to really understand their situation as well, right?
I think somehow the lecturers are also distracted because we have other KPI that we need to fulfill, such as the what do you call it, publications, applying grants, and so on. So it's not that it is not that they may.
All right.
We
So
were lagging. Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
we were lagging a bit. Okay. Yeah, as you were saying just now.
Yeah, I think the lecturers also have a tough time right now because of the KPI required for them to chase for publications and grants and so on. I think that's why somehow we somehow being distracted of focusing what is the actual thing that we're supposed to do. Yeah, that's the challenge as well. But if let's say the students and the lecturers understand each other very well, then this is we can overcome this together lah, in that way.
Right. So Wendy Tan was asking over here, is it expensive to set up this neon board? Yeah, I asked the same question to Dr. Tazli as well. So
So I think it took me about like I think nearly like 500 ringgit for that setup.
right,
So for example, like if let's say you want to buy it, purchase, fabricate it, and put at school, I think that would be wonderful.
right.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe one time, do you have a tutorial video on how to create a neon board like this?
I don't have, but I think it's quite plenty in YouTube. You just
Okay.
Google lightboard, LIGHT board, lightboard.
Right, Lightbot. Okay.
Right.
And by the way, for those of you out there, we have actually shared Dr. Tazli's official website as well as his YouTube channel. So it's drtazli.com, right? Your
Yeah,
official website. You
yeah.
can find more information with regards to Dr. Tazli's work. And yeah, so I guess coming to the end of the session for today, any final conclusions from Dr. Tazli with regards to creating meaningful learning experiences for teachers and educators, or even parents by that nature?
Yeah, yeah. I think the most important part in actually nurturing the creating like meaningful learning is first of all we need to make sure that we really need to understand what is the our intended outcomes that we want to achieve. If we are not clear with that, then we just actually just doing an ambush in the wrong targets, and it's just shooting in at the wrong targets. First of all, it's about understanding what is our intended outcomes, what we wanted to produce from our student itself, what is the outcome, and then only then we decided on what to be this, what will be our instruction, and what will be our assessment. So if let's say these three are aligned together, only then we'll be able to create something which is meaningful to our students and to ourselves. That's very important. So I think that's all I would like to share, Jay.
Okay, right. So for those of you out there who have not catch Dr. Tazli's very in-depth explanation on the overall education aspect and creating meaningful learning experiences, please do go into the edusummit.co, which is in the closed group, right, for the Education Summit, where you can find out more about what he has been explaining about during this entire EduChat series, right? So, Dr. Tazli, thank you so much for joining us today at the
Thank you,
EduChat.
Jay, for inviting me. Yep.
Yeah, we definitely hope to see more work coming out from you, and I'm sure that a lot more activities and also programs are in the kitchen right now, waiting to be leashed out by
Okay.
Dr.
Sure.
Okay,
Sure.
Yeah,
All
so
right.
thank you so much for joining us today, and I wish you best of luck in the future, and we hope to see you soon.
Okay. Thank you, Jay. All right.
Take care.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Bye bye.
Okay, see you. Okay, so that was Dr. Tazli from UTP. So always a very inspiring session working with Dr. Tazli in understanding the fundamental aspect of learning as well as teaching. As an educator myself, I learned a lot and tremendously from his tools and techniques as well. So for those of you who want to find out more work or more research from Dr. Tazli, please head on to his website that we have shared in the chat box below. And also on his YouTube channel as well, where you can see many of his resources that he has been sharing quite frequently on his platform. So we've come to the end of the session for today. So thank you so much for joining us all the way until right now, 2 hours over. And do not forget that next week we would be having another EduChat series as well. So please stay tuned every Saturday, right? So we try to have this edu chat series as often as possible, and hopefully we could have it every week. So next week, a glimpse of it, we will be sharing it in our Facebook page. We will be talking to Dr. Inder Bir. So she is a doctor from Singapore that will be sharing with us on a very interesting topic. So if you're a lecturer, you might sometimes encounter students that might have a mysterious type of students that might be specially gifted in a way. They might have a very tremendously well mannered, where they are able to learn at a very fast learning pace. But however, they might get very fidgety in class when the classroom goes dull and boring and not up to their standard, right? So Dr. Inderbill will be talking a lot about specially gifted students, right? So this is a very interesting topic that I hope teachers out there or even parents, how do you know if you have a very specially gifted children or a very gifted child, right, in your classroom? So we will talk more about this on identifying especially gifted students, as well as the proper way on how you can better nurture them to be successful in the future with the traits of this. Because specially gifted children are a very different species of student that takes a very special care on how you can really develop them into a better student and in the classroom as well. So thank you once again, everyone. So do catch us up next Saturday, same time, 10:30 a.m. as well. And I will see you next week. So if you have any question, please leave down the comments below. So hopefully we are able to see more of your questions so that we can better this talk show or this EduChat series over here. So Jay Wong here, signing off from Saturday. I hope and wish all of you to have a pleasant and awesome weekend. And I will see you next week, next Saturday, 10:30 a.m. Take care.